Today I'm gonna show you how to make a Chasu Ramen. First, we're gonna make the stock, and what I have here is a mix of pork bones and chicken bones that has been soaked with cold water overnight. The reason why I did this is to get rid of the blood, and in that way when we are making the soup, our soup will be clean and has less impurities. And now it's time to sear this and brown this in the oven. Before searing, make sure to pat dry the bones with a paper towel. After searing the bones in the pan, make sure to deglaze this in a cold water. This will add a flavor in our stock. And now we're gonna finish browning this on a screaming hot oven of 250 degrees Celsius. So while the bones is browning, let's cut the other ingredients. We also need dried shiitake mushrooms and dried kombu, and lastly dashi powder. So this is all the ingredients for our ramen base. So we have shiitake mushrooms, ginger, garlic, kombu, carrots, white onion, and a dashi powder. So vegetables doesn't need to be peeled, just make sure to wash it before using it. Now once the bones are deeply browned, it's time to make the stock. Now we're gonna steep the kombu first with 2 liters of water. Once the water comes to simmer for about 10 minutes, turn off the heat and cover for about 5 minutes. So what we are doing here is infusing the flavor of the kombu in the water. After 5 minutes, remove the kombu. What we have here is a kombu, which is a type of seaweed. And this is usually used to flavor some stews or soups, especially in ramen. This will give our ramen soup an umami flavor. And now let's add our pork bones and chicken bones. And then add the rest of the ingredients. The shiitake mushroom goes in as well. Dashi powder. And also don't forget to add the deglazing liquid that we made a while ago. And lastly, add another 1 liter of cold water. Now turn on the heat and let this simmer for about 3 hours. So while simmering, remove the impurities that comes from the top. Now after 30 minutes, remove the shiitake mushrooms and save it for later. After 3 hours of simmering, it's time to strain the stock. And this is our ramen soup base. To make the chasu pork, you need a skinless pork belly, about 2 kilograms. I'm just rolling it and tying it with a butcher's twine. And it doesn't need to be perfect, a simple knot is fine. And now it's time to sear this bad boy. Now to sear the pork, heat the oil on a medium-high heat and sear for 2 to 3 minutes on each side. And set this aside and prepare the rest of the ingredients. And now let's prepare our braising liquid of our pork. 1 cup shoyu, 1 cup mirin, 1 cup sake, 1 cup of water, and 1/4 cup of white sugar. We also need 40 grams of ginger, a bunch of spring onions, about 80 grams, and 1 whole of unpeeled shallots. Now add the mixture on the pot and set to a medium-high heat. Now as soon as the mixture begins to boil, reduce the heat to low. Add the pork back in and let it simmer. Add the ginger, spring onions, and the shallot. Cover and simmer for about 1.5 to 2 hours, turning the pork every 15 minutes. After 2 hours, the pork should be cooked and tender. Just remove it into the pot and let it cool down for about an hour. And then reduce the braising liquid on a sauce consistency. Now once everything is cooled down, place the pork on a large resealable bag. And then add the braising liquid. Place this in the fridge overnight. And now let's make the Ajitsuke Tamago, which is the ramen eggs. 1/4 cup of soy sauce, 1/4 cup of mirin, 1/4 cup of sake, and 1 teaspoon of white sugar. Now mix this until fully dissolved. Now fill the saucepan with water enough to cover the eggs. Then add 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Now once the water is boiling, lower down the heat and gently add the eggs and cook it for about 7 minutes. So the vinegar trick will help our eggs easier to peel once we remove the shell. After 7 minutes, cool down the eggs straight on an ice bath. Now place the egg in a small Ziploc bag or a small container. And then add the soy sauce mixture that we made earlier. Cover and place this in the fridge overnight. And now we're gonna make the tare, which is the seasoning of a ramen soup. So remember, when we made the stock, we didn't add any seasoning on it because the tare will be added later. And mostly chefs at the ramen shop, they have this tare to control the seasoning of each bowl of ramen. To make the tare, you need 1/4 cup of shoyu, which is a Japanese name for soy sauce. 3 tablespoons of the braising liquid that we use from the pork, 2 tablespoons of sesame oil, and lastly 2 teaspoons of mirin. And then just mix this and set this aside, and we'll use it later once we assemble the ramen.
And now let's remove the twine and slice the pork. Just keep in mind that it is very important to leave the chasu pork in the fridge overnight to retain the round shape when we cut it.
And then we'll slice the pork, and this will be one of the toppings of our ramen. And sear the pork before adding it to the ramen. You can use this as well to any other recipes. And now we're gonna cut the shiitake mushrooms. Remove and discard the stems. And now we're gonna cook our egg noodles. The one that I'm using here is just the dried one, but you can just buy it into any supermarkets. Now what I have here is the choices and the toppings that I want to put on my ramen. So I have a julienne carrots, shiitake mushrooms, spring onions, Ajitsuke Tamago, which is the ramen eggs, bamboo shoots, and a nori seaweed. And we also have the chasu pork. And now finally, let's plate the Shoyu Ramen. Now to plate the ramen, on a bowl, add 2 tablespoons of tare first. And then add the ramen broth. And then add the noodles. Add the chasu pork. Some spring onions. Shiitake mushrooms. Then add the ramen eggs. Bamboo shoots. Carrots. And lastly, the nori. And this is our Shuyu Ramen. And now let's try the ramen. Oh wow. This is really good. Now I'm gonna eat now.